Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The rain slashed against the diner's windows, distorting the neon sign's reflection into a watercolor blur of pink and blue. I wiped down the counter for the 5th time that hour, my fingertips wrinkled from harsh cleaning solution and my lower back aching from the double shift. The clock above the grill ticked past midnight. 2 more hours until I could drag myself home to my cramped studio apartment. "Coffee, black," growled the trucker at the end of the counter, not bothering to look up from his phone. "Coming right up," I replied, forcing a cheerfulness I didn't feel into my voice. 8 years of waitressing at Eddie's 24-hour diner had taught me that tips depended on smiles, not service. As I poured the coffee, I caught my reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine, dark circles under hazel eyes, chestnut hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and the permanent wrinkle between my eyebrows that appeared after Mom died last year, leaving me with her medical bills and not much else. At 26, I looked a decade older, worn down by life's endless erosion. The bell above the door jingled, and a gust of cold air swept in along with an elderly man. He stood just inside the entrance, water dripping from his worn tweed coat onto the linoleum floor. His thin white hair was plastered to his head, and he clutched a paper grocery bag that was disintegrating in the rain, the bottom threatening to give way completely. "Sir," I called out, grabbing a clean towel from under the counter. "Let me help you with that." I rushed over, reaching him just as the bag's bottom surrendered to gravity and moisture. We both lunged forward, catching apples, a loaf of bread, and a small carton of milk before they hit the floor. A jar of honey shattered, sending sticky golden liquid across the tiles. "I'm so sorry," the old man said, his voice gentle but trembling slightly. His eyes, a striking ice blue that seemed too vibrant for his weathered face, filled with distress. I didn't realize the rain had soaked through. "It's no problem at all," I assured him, though Eddie would probably dock my pay for the mess. "Please, sit down. I'll help you gather everything." I guided him to a booth away from the door and carefully collected his groceries, placing them in a plastic bag I found in the back. The old man watched me with those piercing blue eyes, something like gratitude and sadness mingling in his gaze. "You're very kind," he said, as I slid into the booth across from him. "Not many people would help a stranger these days." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Tea to warm you up?" "Tea would be wonderful," he nodded, his hands, spotted with age but surprisingly steady, folded neatly on the table. "My name is Giuseppe," he added, the name rolling off his tongue with an Italian accent I hadn't initially noticed. "I'm Ellie," I replied, standing to prepare his tea. "Ellie Morgan." When I returned with the steaming cup, Giuseppe was pulling out his wallet. I waved him off. "It's on the house. Rainy night special," I added with a wink. His weathered face crinkled into a smile. "Then perhaps you will sit with me for a moment. The place is empty, and an old man gets lonely." I glanced around. The trucker had left, leaving a measly $1 tip, and the only other customer was a college student passed out in the corner booth, textbooks sprawled around him. Eddie was in the back, probably sleeping off his usual evening whiskey. "Sure," I said, sliding back into the booth. I could use a break anyway. Giuseppe sipped his tea and asked about me. Before I knew it, I was telling him about Mom's cancer, the crushing medical debt, my community college degree gathering dust while I worked double shifts to keep the electricity on. He listened intently, offering sympathetic nods but no pity, which I appreciated. "What about you?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious about dominating the conversation. "Do you live nearby?" A shadow passed over his face. "I live with my son now. Since my wife passed, he insists I cannot be alone." His accent thickened with emotion. "Sometimes I sneak out, like tonight, just to feel independent again." I understood that need all too well. "Your son must care about you a lot." "Stefano has always been protective," Giuseppe said carefully, his eyes dropping to his tea. "Too much, perhaps. He means well, but he forgets I lived more than 60 years before he was born." He chuckled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Giuseppe's garden, my dream of someday opening a small bookstore cafe, the merits of Earl Grey versus English breakfast tea. For half an hour, I forgot about my exhaustion, the stack of bills waiting at home, and the fact that at 26, my life had stalled before it truly began. When Giuseppe stood to leave, the rain had stopped. I handed him the plastic bag with his salvaged groceries and walked him to the door. "Thank you for the company, Ellie Morgan," he said, patting my hand. "It has been the brightest part of my week." "Come back anytime," I replied, genuinely meaning it. "The tea will always be on the house." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pressed something into my palm, a crisp $100 bill. Before I could protest, he shook his head firmly. "Please. You remind me of my Lucia when she was young." Kindness should be rewarded. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. I stared at the bill in my hand, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease. It would cover part of my electricity bill, but the amount seemed excessive for a cup of tea and some conversation. I didn't see Giuseppe again for 2 weeks. Life continued its relentless grind. Wake up, work, collapse into bed, repeat. Until the Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. It was unusually busy for a weekday, the lunch rush extending well past 2 o'clock. I was balancing 4 plates along my arms, a skill born of necessity, when the diner fell abruptly silent. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, some primal instinct sensing a predator had entered the room. I turned, nearly dropping the tuna melt in my left hand. 3 men in impeccable suits stood just inside the entrance, looking wildly out of place among the diner's worn vinyl and laminate. 2 were clearly security, broad-shouldered, expressionless, with telltale bulges beneath their jackets. But it was the man between them who commanded attention, who had sucked all the oxygen from the room. Tall and lean with raven-black hair and olive skin, he surveyed the diner with casual disdain. His suit wasn't just expensive, it was bespoke, the kind you see in magazines but never in real life. His face could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with precisely maintained stubble, and full lips pressed into a contemplative line. But it was his eyes that struck me most. Ice blue, piercing, familiar. Giuseppe's eyes. The man murmured something to his companions, then moved with leonine grace through the diner, customers shrinking back as he passed. He slid into a booth, my section, and fixed those unsettling eyes on me. I delivered the 4 plates to their table with trembling hands, then approached the newcomer, pulling out my order pad on autopilot. "Welcome to Eddie's," I managed, my voice barely steady. "What can I get for you today?" Up close, he was even more intimidating. A faint scar bisected his left eyebrow, somehow enhancing rather than diminishing his beauty. His cologne, something expensive and subtle, mingled with the scent of leather and something darker, like gunmetal. His fingers, adorned only with a heavy signet ring, drummed soundlessly on the table. "Ellie Morgan," he said, my name unfurling from his lips like smoke. It wasn't a question. My blood turned to ice. "How do you know my name?" His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "You helped my father recently. Giuseppe speaks very highly of you." Understanding dawned. "You're Stefano." He inclined his head slightly, those blue eyes never leaving mine. "Indeed. And you're the waitress who showed kindness to an old man caught in the rain." His accent was more subtle than his father's, but still present, adding a musical quality to his words. "It was nothing," I said, uncomfortable under his intense scrutiny. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he replied with absolute certainty. "They would not. My father wandered off again yesterday. He's becoming forgetful. I've been trying to locate him." Concern flared through me. "Is he okay?" I haven't seen him since that night. Something flashed in Stefano's eyes. Calculation, perhaps, or suspicion. He returned home safely, but mentioned wanting to visit his friend Ellie again. He leaned forward slightly. "You made quite an impression." The way he said it made me feel like I'd done something wrong, crossed some invisible boundary. Like I said, it was nothing, just a cup of tea and some conversation. "And you refused payment," he added, watching me closely. I shifted my weight, suddenly defensive. I gave him tea on the house. He insisted on leaving money afterward. I didn't ask for anything. Stefano studied me for a long moment, as if trying to solve a puzzle. I became acutely aware of my worn uniform, the coffee stain on my apron, my hair escaping its ponytail after hours of work. I felt small and shabby beneath his gaze. "My father would like to see you again," he finally said, reaching into his jacket. I flinched instinctively, a reaction that didn't go unnoticed. His eyes narrowed slightly before he pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. "This is my private number. I'd like to arrange for you to visit him." I didn't touch the card. "I'm sorry, but I don't think that would be appropriate. Your father is welcome here any time, but I don't make house calls." For the first time, Stefano's composed expression faltered, surprise flickering across his features. I got the impression people rarely refused him anything. "It would mean a great deal to him," he said, his voice dropping to a persuasive murmur. "He doesn't connect with many people these days." "I understand, but I'd compensate you generously for your time," he interrupted, misinterpreting my hesitation. "Name your price." Heat flooded my cheeks. "I'm not for sale," I snapped, louder than intended. Several nearby diners turned to look. Stefano's face hardened, and the temperature around us seemed to drop 10 degrees. One of his men took a step forward, but Stefano raised a hand, stopping him without even looking. "You misunderstand me, Miss Morgan," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I'm simply offering payment for your time, as one would any professional service. I'm a waitress, not a companion for hire," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Now, would you like to order something, or shall I bring your check?" The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Then, unexpectedly, Stefano laughed, a rich, warm sound completely at odds with his cold demeanor. Several heads turned again, and I noticed women at nearby tables staring at him with undisguised interest. "You have spirit," he said, sounding genuinely amused. "I see why my father likes you." He stood abruptly, towering over me. "No check necessary. I'll be in touch, Ellie Morgan." He reached out, faster than I could react, and tucked the business card into my apron pocket. His fingers brushed against my hip for the briefest moment, but it sent an electric current racing through me. Before I could protest, he and his men were striding toward the exit. At the door, Stefano paused and looked back at me, those ice-blue eyes burning with something I couldn't decipher. "Until next time," he called, loud enough for everyone to hear, then disappeared into the bright afternoon sun. The diner erupted into whispers the moment the door closed behind them. I stood frozen, feeling as though I'd just survived an encounter with a beautiful, lethal predator. My fingers trembled as I reached into my pocket and pulled out his card. The paper was thick, expensive, with only a name and number embossed in silver. Stefano Ricci. I had no intention of calling, but as I slipped the card back into my pocket, a chill ran down my spine. Something told me I hadn't seen the last of Stefano Ricci, whether I wanted to or not. The next 3 days passed in a strange fog of anticipation and dread. I jumped at every ring of the diner's bell, expecting to see Stefano's imposing figure. Each time the phone rang, my heart leaped into my throat. But there was no sign of him or Giuseppe. By Friday night, I'd convinced myself the encounter had been more significant in my mind than reality. Rich, powerful men like Stefano Ricci didn't waste time pursuing waitresses who had spilled honey on a dirty diner floor. I was wiping down the counter after the dinner rush when Eddie emerged from his office, looking unusually sober and distinctly uncomfortable. "Ellie, you got a minute?" he asked, nervously adjusting his stained apron. I followed him into the cramped back office, where he shut the door, something he never did unless he was firing someone. "Listen," he began, not quite meeting my eyes, "about that guy who came in Tuesday. The Italian in the fancy suit." My stomach tightened. "What about him?" Eddie ran a hand through his thinning hair. "You know who he is, right?" I shrugged. "Giuseppe's son, some rich guy." Eddie's laugh was hollow. "Some rich guy," he echoed. "Ellie, that was Stefano Ricci. The Stefano Ricci." The name meant nothing to me beyond our brief encounter. "Should I know who that is?" Eddie lowered his voice, leaning forward. "The Riccis control half the city. Import, export, construction, waste management. They got fingers in everything." He gave me a meaningful look. "And I don't mean legitimate business, if you catch my drift." I stared at him blankly for a moment before understanding dawned. You're saying he's what? Mafia? Keep your voice down, Eddie hissed, glancing at the closed door. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. The Ricci's have been running things for 3 generations. Word is, Stefano's even more ruthless than his grandfather was. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. I remembered the bodyguards, the dangerous grace with which Stefano moved, the cold calculation in those ice-blue eyes. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I already knew. Eddie sighed. Because he called me today, wanted to know your schedule when you get off work. I told him I couldn't give out employee information. He looked almost proud of himself for that small act of defiance. And he said if I didn't tell him, he'd come down here and ask you himself, with his associates. Eddie swallowed hard. I can't have that kind of trouble in my diner, Ellie. I got a business to run. Anger flared within me. So you sold me out? I gave him your hours, Eddie admitted, guilt flashing across his face. Told him you finish at 10 tonight. Look, I'm sorry, but you don't say no to people like him. You just don't. I stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind me. Fear and rage battled for dominance as I mechanically served the remaining customers, my mind racing. What did Stefano Ricci want with me? Was this about Giuseppe, or something else entirely? At 9:30, I decided I wasn't sticking around to find out. I told the cook I was feeling sick, hung up my apron, and slipped out the back door into the alley. The night air was cool against my flushed skin as I hurried toward the bus stop, constantly glancing over my shoulder. The street was quiet, most businesses closed for the night, windows dark. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around me, wishing I'd worn something warmer. The bus stop was empty, the schedule showing 15 minutes until the next arrival. I sat on the bench, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Stefano just wanted to talk about his father again. Maybe. A sleek black Bentley glided silently to the curb in front of me. My heart stuttered as the back window rolled down, revealing Stefano's unmistakable profile. He didn't look surprised to see me, as if he'd known exactly where I'd be. You left work early, he remarked, his voice carrying easily in the quiet night. And you haven't called. I stood, ready to run, though some rational part of my brain knew it would be pointless. I'm not interested in whatever you're offering. Stefano stepped out of the car in one fluid motion. Tonight, he wore a charcoal suit over a black shirt, no tie, the top buttons undone to reveal a glimpse of smooth olive skin. Despite my fear, I couldn't deny his magnetic presence. You haven't heard my offer yet, he countered, moving closer. Please, at least give me 5 minutes of your time. I glanced down the empty street. The bus was nowhere in sight. Do I have a choice? Something like regret flashed in his eyes. You always have a choice, Ellie Morgan. I'm not the monster you clearly think I am. Your reputation suggests otherwise, I blurted out, immediately wishing I could take the words back. Stefano's lips curved slightly. So someone's been talking. Eddie, I presume? When I didn't answer, he nodded. Reputations serve their purpose. Reality is often more nuanced. He gestured toward the car. 5 minutes. Then my driver will take you wherever you wish to go. I hesitated, weighing my options. The logical choice was to refuse, to wait for the bus, to keep this dangerous man at arm's length, but curiosity, and something deeper I didn't want to examine, pulled me toward him. 5 minutes, I agreed reluctantly. But we stay here, in public. Stefano inclined his head, accepting my terms, and guided me back to the bench. He sat beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. Up close, I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, suggesting he was older than I'd initially thought. Late 30s, perhaps. My father is asking for you, he said without preamble. He's becoming increasingly difficult. The doctors say it's the beginning of dementia. The news hit me harder than expected. I'd only spent an hour with Giuseppe, but his gentle manner had touched something in me. I'm sorry to hear that. He's fixated on your kindness, Stefano continued. For reasons I don't fully understand, he's convinced you're the only person who truly listens to him. I shifted uncomfortably. I just gave him tea and listened to his stories. Sometimes that's all it takes. Stefano's gaze was penetrating. I'm asking you to visit him. Just once. It would mean a great deal. Why me? I asked, genuinely puzzled. Surely there are people better qualified. Because he asked for you, Stefano interrupted, an edge of frustration in his voice. Because you showed him kindness without knowing who he was or what he could offer you. His eyes searched mine. Do you know how rare that is in my world? I believed him, and that realization unsettled me. In Stefano's reality, where power and money opened every door, genuine compassion must indeed be scarce. One visit, I said finally, for Giuseppe. Relief washed over Stefano's face, transforming his features. For a moment, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. Thank you. The bus rumbled into view down the street. I stood, prepared to end our conversation, but Stefano gently caught my wrist. His touch was warm, his fingers calloused in places I wouldn't have expected from a man in tailored suits. Let me drive you home, he said, his voice low. It's late. I pulled my arm free, ignoring the lingering warmth where his skin had touched mine. I'll take the bus. Stefano didn't argue, merely reaching into his pocket and handing me another card. The address, Sunday at 2, if that's convenient. I'll send a car. I can make my own way, I insisted. A smile ghosted across his lips. Of course you can, but security at the estate is particular. It would be easier if you arrived in a recognized vehicle. Estate. The casual reference to such wealth made me acutely aware of the gulf between us. I took the card without looking at it and stepped toward the approaching bus. Ellie, Stefano called, making me turn back. Thank you. Truly. For the first time, there was no calculation in his gaze, no hint of manipulation, just genuine gratitude. It humanized him in a way that was more dangerous than any threat could have been. I nodded once, then boarded the bus without looking back, feeling his eyes on me until we turned the corner. Sunday arrived with gray skies and a fine mist that beaded on my hair as I waited outside my apartment building. Despite my insistence, I'd messaged the number Stefano had given me, agreeing to the car he'd offered. Pride wasn't worth getting lost on the way to what I imagined was a heavily guarded compound. At precisely 1:30, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The driver, a stone-faced man in a black suit, opened the door without speaking. I slid into the leather interior, feeling wildly out of place in my simple blue dress. The nicest thing I owned, yet still woefully inadequate for whatever awaited me. We drove through the city, then north along the coast highway, eventually turning onto a private road guarded by an imposing gate. The driver exchanged words with security, and then we were gliding up a winding driveway flanked by immaculate gardens and towering cypress trees. The house, mansion, came into view, and I had to suppress a gasp. Mediterranean in style, with warm stone walls and terracotta roof tiles, it sprawled elegantly across a bluff overlooking the ocean. Flowering vines climbed the facades, and fountain burbled in a central courtyard. It looked like something from a glossy travel magazine featuring the Italian coastline. Not something I'd expect to find hiding in plain sight, near our industrial port city. The car stopped at a side entrance, where an older woman in a simple black dress waited. She introduced herself as Maria, the housekeeper, and led me through a maze of corridors decorated with antique furniture and artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in several lifetimes. We emerged into a sunroom overlooking the gardens and the ocean beyond. Giuseppe sat in a comfortable chair near the windows, a book open on his lap, looking frailer than I remembered. His face lit up when he saw me. Ellie, you came! He struggled to rise, but I hurried forward, gently pressing him back into his seat. Don't get up, I said, smiling. It's good to see you again, Giuseppe. Giuseppe clasped my hands in his blue eyes bright with joy. Sit, he urged, indicating a chair beside him. Maria, bring tea for our guest. The housekeeper nodded and disappeared silently. I settled into the chair, taking in the sunroom's beauty, potted citrus trees, wicker furniture with plush cushions, and through the windows, an uninterrupted view of the glittering ocean below. How have you been? I asked, genuinely concerned by his thinner frame and the slight tremor in his hands. "Oh, some days better than others," Giuseppe replied with a dismissive wave. "The doctors fuss too much. At my age, forgetting where I put my glasses is normal, no?" His eyes twinkled mischievously. I smiled, but couldn't help wondering if there was more to his condition than he admitted. "It happens to all of us. But you," he continued, studying me intently. "You look tired, my dear. Working too hard still?" Before I could answer, Maria returned with a silver tea service and an assortment of delicate pastries that made my mouth water. She poured for us, then retreated to the doorway where she stood silently, watching. Giuseppe frowned. "Maria, please give us privacy." The housekeeper hesitated, then nodded curtly and left. Giuseppe leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They watch me constantly now, like a child." Frustration colored his words. "Stefano means well, but..." He trailed off, sighing. "He seems very protective of you," I offered cautiously. Giuseppe's laugh was sharp. "Protective. Yes, that's one word for it." He sipped his tea, then set the cup down with a slight clatter. "My son has always been intense, even as a boy. After his mother died, it became worse. I wasn't sure how to respond, uncomfortable with this glimpse into their complicated relationship. "The tea is wonderful," I said instead, changing the subject. Giuseppe smiled, recognizing my discomfort. "Tell me about your dreams again, Ellie. The bookstore cafe. Have you made any progress?" For the next hour, we chatted easily. I shared more about my aspirations, and Giuseppe told stories of his youth in Sicily, his journey to America, meeting his wife. He was an engaging storyteller, and I found myself laughing often, nearly forgetting where I was and why I'd come. "You should have seen her," Giuseppe was saying, eyes distant with memory as he described his first meeting with his wife. Standing on that pier with the sun behind her, most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. "Like you?" She had fire in her eyes. His expression shifted, focusing on something or someone behind me. I turned to find Stefano standing in the doorway, watching us with an inscrutable expression. Unlike our previous encounters, he was dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that softened his intimidating presence, making him appear almost approachable. "Stefano," Giuseppe called, gesturing him forward. "Come meet my friend properly." Stefano crossed the room with that same fluid grace, resting a hand on his father's shoulder. The affection between them was evident, despite Giuseppe's earlier complaints. "Miss Morgan," Stefano nodded, his blue eyes assessing me. "I trust you found the journey comfortable?" "Very, thank you," I replied, suddenly self-conscious. Beside Stefano's effortless elegance, I felt like an imposter in my department store dress. "She's been keeping me entertained with her stories," Giuseppe said, patting Stefano's hand. Such a bright young woman. Something flashed in Stefano's eyes. Possessiveness? Suspicion? Indeed. He turned to me. "I hope you'll join us for lunch. The chef has prepared something special." It wasn't really a question, and I found myself following them through the house to a terrace overlooking the gardens. A table was set for 3, crystal glasses catching the weak sunlight that had emerged from behind the clouds. Lunch was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Multiple courses of exquisite food, wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and service so discreet it was almost invisible. Throughout the meal, I felt Stefano's eyes on me, studying my reactions, measuring my words. Giuseppe dominated the conversation, switching occasionally to Italian when speaking to Stefano, who would respond in kind before returning to English. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone of these exchanges grew increasingly tense as the meal progressed. Finally, after what appeared to be a particularly heated exchange, Giuseppe stood abruptly. "I'm feeling tired. I think I'll rest before dinner." He turned to me, his expression softening. "You'll stay? Have dinner with us?" Before I could form a response, Stefano cut in smoothly. "I'm sure Miss Morgan has other obligations. We shouldn't impose further." Giuseppe waved dismissively. "Nonsense. The girl works too hard. Let her enjoy an evening off." He took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Please stay. Caught between them, I hesitated. The rational part of my brain screamed that I should leave, return to the safety of my ordinary life. But another part, a part I barely recognized, wanted to stay, wanted to understand more about these complicated men and their world. I'd love to, I heard myself saying, but I didn't bring anything appropriate for dinner. Stefano's mouth quirked. That can be easily remedied. Giuseppe beamed triumphantly at his son before turning back to me. Settle then. I'll see you at dinner. He shuffled away, accompanied by a nurse who had appeared silently at his side. Left alone with Stefano, an awkward silence descended. He swirled the wine in his glass, studying the ruby liquid with apparent fascination. Your father is quite persuasive, I finally said. Stefano's laugh was unexpected and genuine. A family trait, though he employs charm where I typically use other methods. The casual admission sent a chill down my spine, reminding me of who I was dealing with. I should probably go. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, Stefano said, setting down his glass. My father enjoys your company. It's been some time since I've seen him so animated. His gaze was direct, challenging. Unless you're uncomfortable, I met his eyes squarely. Should I be? Something like respect flickered across his features. Most people would be, yet here you sit, having lunch with a man you believe to be a monster. I never called you a monster, but you thought it, he countered. When Eddie told you who I was, I didn't deny it. I don't know you. No, Stefano agreed, his voice softening. You don't. Few people do. He stood abruptly. Come, I'll show you the gardens while my father rests. The grounds were even more impressive up close. Meticulously maintained flower beds, stone pathways winding through groves of olive trees, and secluded benches offering views of the ocean below. Security personnel maintained a discreet distance as Stefano led me through his domain, pointing out rare plants and explaining the property's history. My grandfather built this place, he said, as we paused by a marble fountain. He came from nothing, created an empire through sheer will. And what kind of empire was that? I asked boldly. Stefano's smile was sharp, a complicated one. Times were different then. And now? Now we adapt, evolve. Legitimate enterprises are more stable, less problematic. But not entirely legitimate, I pressed, surprising myself with my daring. Instead of anger, Stefano seemed amused by my persistence. The world isn't black and white, Ellie. Especially for immigrant families who weren't welcomed into polite society. His expression hardened. We protected our own when no one else would. I fell silent, processing his words. There was truth there, mixed with justification for choices I couldn't begin to understand. We continued walking, the conversation shifting to safer topics. Books, music, travel. Stefano was educated, articulate, unexpectedly well-read. In another context, I might have found him charming. As we circled back toward the house, Stefano stopped suddenly. I have business to attend to before dinner. Maria will show you to a guest room where you can rest. She'll also provide some options for evening attire. That's not necessary. Please, he interrupted, his tone gentler than I'd heard before. Allow me this courtesy, for my father's sake. I nodded reluctantly, and he escorted me to the house where Maria waited. Before leaving, he hesitated, then added, Thank you for being kind to him. It means more than you know. As the afternoon stretched into evening, I found myself in a surreal situation. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment, with a bathroom featuring marble surfaces and luxury products I'd only seen in magazines. Maria had brought several dresses, all exactly my size, which raised questions I decided not to dwell on, along with shoes and jewelry. I chose the simplest option, a black cocktail dress with minimal detailing, though even this was finer than anything I'd ever worn. Looking at my reflection, I barely recognized myself. The woman in the mirror looked elegant, composed, a far cry from the exhausted waitress I'd been that morning. At 7, Maria escorted me to a formal dining room where Giuseppe waited, looking refreshed after his rest. His face lit up when he saw me. Beautiful, he declared, patting the chair beside him. Like a princess, I blushed, unused to such compliments. Hardly. But thank you for the lovely dress. My son's doing. Giuseppe confided with a wink. He has excellent taste. As if summoned by his name, Stefano entered. He'd changed into a tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. He paused when he saw me, his expression inscrutable. "Miss Morgan," he said formally, taking his seat across from me. "The dress suits you." Before I could respond, the first course arrived. Dinner progressed much like lunch. Exquisite food, fine wine, and conversation dominated by Giuseppe, who seemed determined to draw connections between Stefano and me. "Did Stefano tell you he also wanted to open a bookstore once?" Giuseppe asked me at one point, when he was at university, before he joined the family business. Stefano's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago, Father. Dreams don't die. They just change form," Giuseppe insisted. "Isn't that right, Ellie?" I felt caught in their private battle. "Sometimes circumstances force our dreams to adapt," I offered diplomatically. Giuseppe nodded sagely. "Exactly. But circumstances can change again, no?" As dessert was served, Giuseppe's energy began to flag visibly. His hands trembled more pronouncedly, and twice he seemed to lose the thread of conversation. Stefano watched him with barely concealed concern. "I think it's time for you to rest, Father," he said gently, after Giuseppe struggled to lift his coffee cup. For once, the older man didn't argue. "Perhaps you're right." He turned to me, squeezing my hand. "You'll come again? Soon?" The naked hope in his eyes made my throat tight. "Of course." Stefano called for the nurse, who appeared immediately to help Giuseppe to his feet. The old man kissed my cheek before allowing himself to be led away, leaving Stefano and me alone once more. "I should be going too," I said into the silence. "It's getting late." Stefano studied me, his expression unreadable. "One more drink?" "On the terrace. The night view is worth seeing." I should have refused. Should have thanked him for his hospitality and asked to be driven home. Instead, I found myself following him through the house to a different terrace, this one smaller and more intimate, with a fire pit casting warmth against the cool night air. The fire danced in the pit, casting golden light across the terrace as Stefano poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He handed one to me, our fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. "Cognac," he explained. "My grandfather's favorite." I accepted the glass, but didn't drink immediately, instead watching as Stefano settled into a chair opposite mine. The night was clear now, stars scattered across the dark canvas above, the ocean a black mirror reflecting the moon's silvery path. From this vantage point, the city lights glimmered in the distance, reminding me of how far I was, in every sense, from my normal life. "Your father is quite remarkable," I said, breaking the silence. Stefano's mouth curved slightly. He's always had a gift for connecting with people. It served him well in his younger days. "And what about you?" I ventured. "Did you inherit that gift?" His laugh was soft, almost self-deprecating. "I inherited different qualities: precision, calculation, a certain pragmatism. Qualities better suited to running an empire?" "Precisely." He sipped his cognac, his eyes never leaving mine over the rim of his glass. "Though I sometimes wonder what my mother would think of the man I've become." The admission surprised me, a rare glimpse of vulnerability from someone who seemed defined by strength and control. I took a small sip of the cognac, the liquid warming my throat. What was she like? Something softened in Stefano's expression. Beautiful, kind, stubborn. His smile grew more genuine. She stood up to my father when no one else dared. Even stood up to my grandfather, which was unprecedented. "You miss her," I observed quietly. "Every day." He leaned forward, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "She would have liked you." The compliment caught me off guard, sending an unexpected flutter through my chest. I looked away, focusing on the distant city lights. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "I know more than you think," Stefano countered. When I tensed, he added, "Not in the invasive way you're imagining. I simply pay attention. You're kind to an old man with no expectation of reward. You work double shifts yet still pursue education when you can. You live frugally but send money to your cousin's children every month." My head snapped up. "How do you—" As I said, I pay attention. Stefano's expression remained neutral. It's not surveillance, Ellie. It's interest. The distinction seems minimal from where I'm sitting, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He inclined his head, acknowledging my point. Fair enough. But surely you understand my caution. My father is precious to me. His welfare is my priority, and you thought I might be taking advantage of him somehow. A waitress from a diner. I consider all possibilities. Stefano set his glass down. In my position, trust must be earned. And have I earned it? I challenged. The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us fully understood. Stefano studied me with those penetrating blue eyes before answering. You're beginning to, he said finally, which is rare enough to be noteworthy. We fell into silence, the crackling fire and distant wave sounds filling the void. I finished my cognac, feeling its warmth spread through me, relaxing muscles I hadn't realized were tense. It's getting late, Stefano observed after a time. I've kept you longer than intended. Yes, I agreed, though strangely reluctant to leave. This glimpse into another world, Giuseppe's warmth, the beauty of this place, even Stefano's complex, dangerous presence, had been intoxicating in its way. He escorted me through the house, where the driver already waited. At the door, Stefano hesitated. My father would be pleased if you visited again, he said carefully. Perhaps next weekend? I should have refused. Should have made an excuse. Instead, I heard myself say, I'd like that. Something like satisfaction flickered in Stefano's eyes. Good. I'll send the car. He reached out, taking my hand in his. Thank you for today, Ellie Morgan. You've brought light to this house that has been absent for too long. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against my knuckles. Formal, old world, yet sending electricity racing through me. Before I could respond, he released me and stepped back. Until next time, he said, the phrase echoing our first meeting at the diner. As the car pulled away, I watched Stefano's silhouette in the doorway, until darkness swallowed it whole. The week crawled by, each shift at the diner more tedious than the last. I found my thoughts drifting repeatedly to the Ricci estate, to Giuseppe's stories, to Stefano's intense blue gaze. I told myself it was merely fascination with a lifestyle so different from my own. Nothing more. Eddie watched me curiously, but asked no questions about my Sunday absence. The other waitresses, however, weren't as discreet. Rumors had spread about the Italian mobster, who'd singled me out, growing more outlandish with each retelling. Is it true he left you $1,000 tip? Jessie asked during a rare quiet moment. Or that he threatened to buy the diner just to fire everyone except you, added Marla, eyes wide. I laughed off their questions, refusing to feed the gossip mill. The truth, that I'd spent Sunday at his estate, dining with him and his father, would only fuel the flames further. By Friday, a package arrived at my apartment. No note, no return address, just an elegantly wrapped box containing a first edition of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, a book I'd mentioned to Giuseppe as my childhood favorite. The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to my eyes, though I couldn't be certain whether it came from father or son. Sunday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, temperatures warm enough to hint at the approaching summer. The same driver collected me at the same time. But this visit felt different. There was anticipation now, familiarity where there had been uncertainty. Giuseppe greeted me in the garden, where a table had been set for lunch beneath a pergola draped with wisteria. He looked stronger than before, his eyes brighter, his movements more sure. You came back, he said, embracing me like family. I told Stefano you would. Of course I did, I replied, genuinely happy to see him. Thank you for the book. It's beautiful. Giuseppe's brow furrowed. Book? Ah, Stefano's doing, not mine. He mentioned you were fond of Austen. He winked conspiratorially. My son pays attention to details. The knowledge that Stefano had been the one to send such a thoughtful gift, not Giuseppe as I'd assumed, shifted something inside me. I tried to ignore the warmth spreading through my chest. We settled at the table, Giuseppe regaling me with stories of his week, the garden he'd been allowed to tend under supervision, the argument he'd won against his doctor about red wine with dinner. There was no sign of Stefano, and I found myself glancing toward the house occasionally, a fact that didn't escape Giuseppe's notice. He had business in the city, the older man explained with a knowing smile. But he promised to join us for dinner. I felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed, emotions I wasn't ready to examine too closely. After lunch, Giuseppe showed me his garden, proudly pointing out tomato plants and herbs he'd started from seeds. Despite his age and condition, his knowledge was extensive, his passion evident in every description. He spoke of Sicily, of the gardens his mother had tended, of traditions carried across oceans and generations. "Family is everything," he said, as we rested on a stone bench. "Blood ties that cannot be broken, no matter the circumstances. Do you understand?" I thought of my own fractured family. My mother gone, my father unknown, distant relatives who rarely called. "Not really," I admitted. "But it sounds beautiful." Giuseppe patted my hand. "It can be. It can also be a cage." Something distant entered his eyes. Stefano was only 12 when his mother died. Too young to shoulder such responsibility, but he insisted. "Became the man of the house overnight. That's a heavy burden for a child," I said softly. "Yes, and it shaped him in ways." Giuseppe sighed deeply. "I worry he'll never know true happiness, only duty." I didn't know how to respond to this intimate glimpse into Stefano's past. Before I could formulate a reply, Giuseppe changed the subject, asking about my week, my studies, my dreams for the future. His interest was genuine, his advice thoughtful, and surprisingly practical. As afternoon faded toward evening, Giuseppe's energy began to wane. The nurse appeared, suggesting he rest before dinner. This time, he agreed without argument, squeezing my hand before leaving me alone in the garden. Maria showed me to the same guest room as before, where I found another dress waiting, this one a deep emerald green that complemented my coloring perfectly. Once again, I marveled at how accurately Stefano had guessed my size and preferences. After showering and changing, I stood at the window watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The beauty of this place was seductive, making my apartment seem dingier, my life smaller by comparison. A dangerous train of thought. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. When I opened it, I found Stefano standing there, still in his business suit, looking slightly weary, but impeccable as always. "You came back," he said, echoing his father's earlier greeting, but with an undertone I couldn't quite identify. "I said I would." His lips curved slightly. "People often say things they don't mean." "I'm not people," I replied simply. Something flickered in his eyes, approval perhaps. "No, you're not." He offered his arm. "Shall we? My father is waiting." Dinner was served in a different room this time, a less formal space with windows overlooking the moonlit ocean. Giuseppe was already seated, looking refreshed after his rest, his eyes brightening when we entered together. The evening unfolded pleasantly, the conversation flowing more naturally than our previous dinner. Giuseppe dominated as before, but Stefano participated more readily, occasionally revealing a dry wit that surprised laughter from me. Once or twice I caught Giuseppe watching us with undisguised satisfaction, like a chess player seeing his pieces align as planned. As dessert was served, Giuseppe asked, "Will you play for us, Stefano? It's been too long." Stefano hesitated, glancing my way. "I'm sure Ellie isn't interested in my amateur attempts." "Nonsense," Giuseppe insisted. "The girl will love it. You play beautifully." "Curious now," I added. "I'd like to hear you play." Stefano relented, leading us after dinner to a room I hadn't seen before, a music room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a grand piano at its center. He sat at the bench with casual grace, running his fingers over the keys in a brief warm-up before launching into Chopin. I watched, transfixed, as this dangerous, controlled man transformed before my eyes. His expression softened, passion replacing precision as the music flowed through him. His fingers moved with effortless skill across the keys, drawing forth sounds so beautiful they made my chest ache. Giuseppe watched his son with unmistakable pride, occasionally glancing at me to gauge my reaction, and my reaction was undeniable. I was moved, not just by the music, but by this unexpected glimpse of Stefano's soul laid bare. When the piece ended, silence hung in the room. thick with emotion. Stefano looked up, his eyes finding mine, vulnerability and question in his gaze. "That was beautiful," I said softly, meaning it. Something passed between us in that moment. A connection, a recognition, a possibility neither of us had anticipated. Giuseppe cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "I find myself tired again," he announced, though his eyes were bright and alert. "Perhaps you young people would enjoy a walk in the gardens. The night is lovely." His matchmaking was transparent, but neither Stefano nor I called him on it. We bid him good night, and then we were alone again, the air between us charged with something new and undefined. We walked in silence through the moonlit gardens, following a stone path that wound between fragrant rosemary hedges and flowering jasmine. The ocean's rhythmic murmur provided a gentle backdrop, punctuated by nightbirds calling from the cypress trees. Despite the tranquility, tension hummed between us, unspoken questions, unacknowledged attraction, and the reality of our vastly different worlds. "Your father is quite the matchmaker," I finally said, breaking the silence. Stefano chuckled, the sound warm in the night air, subtle as a sledgehammer. "I apologize if it made you uncomfortable." "It didn't," I admitted. "It's sweet, actually. He cares about you." "He worries," Stefano corrected, guiding me toward a stone balustrade overlooking the cliffs. "He thinks I've sacrificed too much for the family, for the business." I leaned against the cool stone, gazing at the moonlight dancing on the waves below. "And have you?" He considered this, standing close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I made choices. We all do." His voice softened. "But lately, I've been wondering if some things were lost that can't be recovered." "Like what?" "Normalcy. Simplicity." He turned to me, his face half illuminated by moonlight, half in shadow. The chance to be known for myself, not my name or reputation. The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. For all his power and danger, in that moment Stefano Ricci seemed profoundly human, a man trapped by circumstances, bound by duty and expectation. "Is that why you were drawn to me?" I asked boldly. "Because I knew nothing about you when we met?" His smile was rueful. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I was drawn to your kindness to an old man who needed it." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "Or perhaps I simply find you beautiful, Ellie Morgan." My breath caught at his touch, at the intensity in his eyes. "This can't go anywhere," I said softly, even as I leaned slightly into his hand. "Your world and mine, they don't intersect. Yet, here we are," he countered, his thumb tracing my jawline, intersecting quite definitively. Before I could respond, a discreet cough sounded behind us. Stefano dropped his hand, turning to find one of his security men standing several paces away. "What is it, Antonio?" Stefano asked, his voice instantly colder, the vulnerable man vanishing behind the mask of authority. "A call, sir. From Naples." The man's expression conveyed urgency without details. Stefano nodded sharply. "I'll take it in my office." He turned back to me, regret in his eyes. "I have to handle this. Please, make yourself comfortable. I shouldn't be long." I watched him stride away, back straight, shoulders set, every inch the powerful man his reputation suggested. The contrast with the pianist, with the son who worried his father, with the man who had almost kissed me moments before, was stark and unsettling. Left alone, I wandered the gardens, trying to sort through my conflicted emotions. Whatever was happening between Stefano and me was dangerous, not just because of who he was, but because I found myself caring despite knowing better. After 30 minutes with no sign of him returning, I decided to head back to the house. The night had grown cooler, and weariness was setting in. As I approached the terrace, voices carried through an open window, Stefano's and another man's, speaking rapid Italian. Though I couldn't understand the words, the tone was unmistakably tense. I hesitated, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like business. As I turned to find another entrance, Stefano's voice switched to English. "It's unacceptable," he was saying, cold fury in each syllable. "We had an agreement. If they've broken it, there will be consequences." "They claim ignorance," the other man replied. "Say it was a rogue action." "I don't believe in coincidences, Marco." Stefano's voice lowered dangerously. Find out who's responsible. Send the appropriate message. The words sent a chill through me, a stark reminder of who exactly I was dealing with. This wasn't just a man who sent thoughtful gifts and played Chopin with passion. This was someone who sent messages, who commanded fear and respect in a world I could barely comprehend. I backed away silently, circling around to another entrance. Inside, I encountered Maria, who seemed unsurprised to see me. Mr. Ricci asked me to apologize, she said formally. He's been detained by business and will be occupied for some time. He's arranged for the car to take you home whenever you're ready. The dismissal was polite but clear. Whatever moment we'd shared in the garden had passed, reality reasserting itself between us. I nodded, forcing a smile. I understand. I'm ready now. As the car carried me back to my apartment, I stared out the window at the passing lights, trying to reconcile the different versions of Stefano I'd encountered. The ruthless businessman, the devoted son, the passionate musician, the man who'd nearly kissed me beneath the moon. Which was the real Stefano Ricci? Perhaps they all were, facets of a complex man shaped by circumstance and choice. The next morning, roses arrived at my door, 24 deep red blooms with a simple card. Until next time, S. I arranged them in the only vase I owned, their beauty incongruous in my shabby apartment, much like my growing feelings for their sender. Days passed with no further contact. I returned to my routine, work, study, sleep. But thoughts of the Ricci estate, of Giuseppe's stories and Stefano's intense gaze, lingered at the edges of my consciousness. By Friday, I'd convinced myself that whatever had begun between us had ended, a brief intersection of disparate lives, nothing more. Then Giuseppe called the diner. Ellie, my dear. His voice was strained, lacking its usual vigor. I wonder if you might visit this Sunday. There's something important I need to discuss with you. Concern overrode my hesitation. Of course. Is everything all right? Just come, he said cryptically. Please. Sunday found me once again in the familiar Mercedes, winding up the coastal road to the estate. This time, however, something felt different. The security at the gate was heavier, the guards more vigilant. The driver remained silent to my questions. Maria met me at the door, her usual composure fractured by worry. Mr. Ricci is in his room. He's been asking for you all morning. She led me through the house to Giuseppe's suite, a spacious set of rooms I hadn't seen before, decorated with antiques and photographs spanning decades. Giuseppe sat in an armchair by the window, looking frailer than I'd ever seen him, a blanket across his legs despite the warm day. Ellie. He smiled weakly. You came. I said I would, I replied, echoing my words to Stefano from our last meeting. I knelt beside his chair, taking his cold hand in mine. What's wrong? Giuseppe patted my hand. Time catches us all eventually, my dear. The doctors say my heart is tired. His blue eyes, so like his son's, held mine steadily. I don't have much time left. The news struck me harder than I would have expected for someone I'd known so briefly. In our few meetings, Giuseppe had become important to me, his kindness, his stories, his genuine interest in my life. I'm so sorry, I whispered, squeezing his hand. Is there anything I can do? Yes, he said with sudden urgency. You can listen and understand. He glanced toward the door, lowering his voice. My son. He carries too much weight, has for too long. His whole life he's done what was expected, what was needed for the family. I nodded, unsure where this was leading. When I'm gone, he'll have no one, Giuseppe continued. No one who sees him, truly sees him, beyond the name, beyond the business. His grip on my hand tightened. But you do, don't you? The directness of his question caught me off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. Giuseppe's smile was knowing. I see how you look at each other, how you speak to him. Not as Stefano Ricci, the businessman, the feared name, but as Stefano the man. His eyes grew distant. You remind me of my Lucia. She saw past everything to the heart of me. Giuseppe, I began carefully. Stefano and I barely know each other. and our worlds are completely different. Worlds can change, he insisted. People don't. And my son, beneath everything, is a good man. Complicated, yes. Dangerous when crossed, certainly. But good. His gaze sharpened. Promise me you won't give up on him too easily. Before I could respond, the door opened and Stefano entered. He'd clearly come directly from somewhere important, his suit impeccable, his expression guarded, until he saw me kneeling beside his father. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, followed by something softer. Ellie, he said, my name a question on his lips. I didn't realize you were visiting today. I asked her to come, Giuseppe interjected. We had things to discuss. He looked meaningfully between us, and now we have. Help me to bed, Stefano. I need to rest. With gentle efficiency, Stefano helped his father to the adjoining bedroom, speaking quietly to him in Italian. When he returned, he closed the door softly behind him, his expression troubled. He told you about his condition, Stefano said, not a question. I nodded. I'm so sorry, Stefano. If there's anything I can do, you've already done it, he replied, moving closer. Your visits bring him joy, more than I've seen in years. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. I should have called you myself this week. Things have been complicated. I remembered the conversation I'd overheard, the message he'd ordered sent. I understand. His eyes met mine, searching. Do you? I wonder. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I thought of Giuseppe's request, of the conflicting emotions Stefano stirred in me, of the impossibility of any future between us. I should go, I said finally. Let Giuseppe rest. Stefano nodded, but as I moved toward the door, he caught my arm gently. Have dinner with me tonight. Just us. There are things I need to say to you. I hesitated, torn between caution and the undeniable pull he exerted over me. All right, I agreed. Just dinner. The relief in his eyes was palpable. I'll pick you up at 7. The next few hours passed in a blur. I spent time with Giuseppe, reading to him until he drifted to sleep, then retreated to the guest room, my room, as Maria called it, to prepare for the evening. The closet now contained several outfits in my size, as if my returns had been anticipated and planned for. At precisely 7, Stefano knocked on my door. He'd changed into a more casual outfit. Dark trousers and a light sweater that softened his usual intimidating presence. He looked younger, less burdened. I thought we'd go out, he said, surprising me, away from here. If that's acceptable, I nodded, curious about this unexpected change. Instead of the usual Mercedes, a sleek Aston Martin waited in the driveway. Stefano opened the passenger door for me, then slid behind the wheel himself. No driver tonight, no security detail following. Where are we going? I asked as we wound down the coastal road, the car handling the curves with powerful grace. Somewhere special, he replied cryptically, a small smile playing at his lips. 20 minutes later, he pulled up to a small, unassuming restaurant perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. No valet, no red carpet, just a weathered wooden sign reading Maria's, swinging gently in the breeze. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and unpretentious, checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, the scent of garlic and fresh herbs permeating the air. The elderly proprietor greeted Stefano with genuine warmth, embracing him and chattering in rapid Italian, before leading us to a secluded table on the terrace. As we settled in, I looked at Stefano questioningly. This was my mother's favorite place, he explained, something vulnerable in his expression. I've never brought anyone else here. The significance of his admission wasn't lost on me. This wasn't the powerful Stefano Ricci entertaining business associates at exclusive restaurants. This was Stefano the man, sharing something deeply personal. Over simple but exquisite food and local wine, we talked, really talked, for the first time. He told me about his childhood, his mother's illness, his reluctant but determined assumption of family responsibilities at a young age. I shared stories of my own struggles. Growing up with a single mother, working since 16, the dreams deferred but not abandoned. As the evening progressed, something shifted between us. The barriers, of circumstance, of caution, of our different worlds, didn't vanish, but they became more permeable, less absolute. "My father likes you," Stefano said as dessert arrived. "More than likes you, actually. He thinks you're exactly what I need in my life." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "He's not exactly subtle about it." Stefano's laugh was genuine. Subtlety has never been his strength. His expression grew serious. "But he may be right." My heart stuttered. "Stefano, let me finish," he said gently. "I know how this looks, who I am, what I do, the complications of my life. I know it's not fair to ask anything of you." "But you're going to anyway?" I suggested, a strange calm settling over me. His smile was rueful. "I am. Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, I find myself thinking beyond duty, beyond obligation. When I'm with you, I remember the man I might have been in another life." He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I'm not asking for promises, Ellie. Just possibility. A chance to see if there's something real between us, despite everything." I looked at our joined hands, his strong and scarred in places, mine still showing the calluses of hard work. Different paths, different lives, yet somehow fitting together in this moment. "It won't be easy," I said softly. "Few worthwhile things are," he replied, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of fire, I made my choice, not with certainty of outcome, but with certainty of feeling. Whatever path lay ahead, complicated, dangerous, impossible as it might seem, I wanted to walk it with this complex, compelling man who had unexpectedly entered my life because I helped an old man with his groceries. "Yes," I said simply, squeezing his hand. "Yes to possibility." Stefano's smile, genuine, unguarded, transformative, was worth every risk the future might hold. Epilogue. 1 year later. The bookstore cafe buzzes with afternoon customers, students with laptops, mothers with young children exploring the children's corner, business people grabbing coffee between meetings. I wipe down the counter, arranging fresh pastries in the display case, satisfaction warming me from within. The bell above the door jingles, and I look up to see Stefano entering, a potted plant carefully cradled in his hands. Since Giuseppe's passing 6 months ago, Stefano has taken up his father's gardening hobby, finding peace in nurturing growing things. "For your office," he says, setting the fragrant rosemary plant on the counter. From the estate cuttings, I lean across the counter to kiss him, no longer surprised by the happiness that blooms whenever he's near. "It's perfect. Thank you." He glances around the busy cafe, pride evident in his gaze. "How's business today?" "Booming," I reply honestly. The bookstore cafe, Giuseppe's, named in honor of the man who inadvertently brought us together, has been successful beyond my wildest dreams, though I harbor no illusions about the source of some of that success. Stefano's connections ensured prime location, favorable loans, and a steady stream of customers in the early days. But I've made this place my own, insisting on genuine independence, even as I accepted his help. The books are my selection, the recipes my mother's, the atmosphere exactly as I'd always envisioned. A dream realized, not given. "Dinner at the house tonight?" Stefano asks, his hand covering mine. The simple gold band on his finger catches the light. A recent addition, formalized just 3 weeks ago in a small ceremony at the estate gardens. "Wouldn't miss it," I reply. Our relationship isn't without complications. His business still operates in shadows I don't fully illuminate, and reconciling our different worlds requires constant navigation. But we've found our balance, a shared life neither of us could have anticipated that rainy night when I helped an old man with his groceries. As Stefano leaves, pausing at the door to look back at me with those piercing blue eyes, his father's eyes, now filled with something I never expected to find. Love. I think of Giuseppe's words from that day in his room. Worlds can change. People don't. In the end, he was right. Our worlds adapted, merged, created something new between them. And Stefano, beneath everything, was indeed a good man. Complicated, powerful, sometimes dangerous, but fundamentally good. With a capacity for love I'm privileged to have discovered. The bell jingles again as another customer enters, pulling me back to the present moment. to this life I've chosen, with all its complexity and unexpected joy.